Hello everybody and welcome back to more of the Player Guide series. My name is Zen and we are starting the very first episode of the Intermediate series. Just so you're aware, we've done a beginner series which ended up lasting quite a few episodes. However, now we're moving into the Intermediate series where we're going to be talking more directly to the players who've been playing for some time and really want to get better at the game. More specifically, though, we'll be talking about gaming gear in this video, and gaming gear is one of those things that you start playing games enough that you get to the point where you're like, you know, my keyboard isn't good enough, my mouse doesn't feel like it's good enough, I need a new headset, stuff like that, and you gotta make an informed decision on what you want and what's gonna work best for you. So in this video, I'm gonna kind of give you guys as much of a variety of items as possible, but I am going to give you my suggestion based on items that I've used and items that I've liked more than others. But what is gamer gear exactly? I mean, that's kind of a strange term, and it's actually something that's fairly new to the industry, so let's kind of talk through this. Well, you know, gamer gear, gaming gear, whatever you want to call it, is just hardware that has been designed with gamers in mind, you know, such as keyboards, mice, mouse pads, headsets, stuff like that. And these things were designed to remove the barrier between you and the game. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're a bad player and you get a ton of gamer gear, you're not going to suddenly become a really good player. You're just going to be a less bad player. I mean, you're still going to be bad at the game, right? It's not going to make you any better at the game. However, if you're a good player and you have a ton of new gamer gear, you're going to feel the difference. You're going to feel like you can play quicker, you can play more efficiently, and especially if you're upgrading from really bad stuff, like a cheapo keyboard that you got from Walmart for like $10, it's going to make a big difference in your play style, and you'll get much better at the game if you were already good at it. See, and that's kind of the difference. Don't go out buying a ton of gamer gear expecting to get better, because it's not going to make you better. It will feel better to play, and that's for sure. Gamer gear does definitely help with the comfort of playing games. You know, if you're playing games for long hours, a lot of this stuff can help with uncomfortability with, you know, headsets and stuff like that. But for the most part, you know, your skill will come out if you're a good player. So as I mentioned before, I am going to give you a pretty eclectic taste of items here, but I'm also going to avoid giving you exact prices because prices tend to change in this market fairly often, and things typically go on sale fairly regularly. So if I give you like a price, it's typically not going to be right in the future, and I want this guide to remain accurate for some time here. There is a rule of thumb to adhere to when going into all of this, though, and that is to avoid wireless gear. You don't want a wireless mouse, you don't want a wireless keyboard, because there is going to be a latency there. And some gear more than others, you'll notice, but for the most part, it is there. And wired gear is just much better. You'll get better response times, and then you don't have to worry about batteries, which is always a positive to all of this. So let's start with the mouse, right? So the mouse is one of the most important parts of your gaming experience if you're gaming on the PC. And in fact, I am going to show you the one that I use first because I think it's the best one out of all of these, and we'll talk about that. However, that is the Razer Naga. Now, specifically for MMO gaming, the Naga is just the uber beast, right? There's so many things here that make this the choice that I would go to for Star Wars or any other MMO out there. The first part, obviously, being that it has 12 buttons on the side. There's a couple of different versions of the Naga that have come out throughout the years. I use one of the older ones, but I have used the new one, the 2013 edition, which has like green lighting on it, and it has mechanical keys instead of the normal keys for the 12-button thumb grid, and mechanical's always pretty much better as far as gaming goes, just as a rule of thumb. But it has a left-handed variant as well, so if you're left-handed, you could do that. It has a tilt scroll wheel, so you can actually tilt your scroll wheel left and right. That gives you, 2 additional binds that you can use there. It has the middle buttons in the middle, aside from the middle mouse button, which would be the scroll wheel push down. It has 2 additional ones. So all in all, you're looking at a lot of ability to bind your abilities to, the mouse and your keyboard, because then you can also do a modifier key such as Alt, which we'll get into in the key binding guide, but you can use Alt and then, suddenly that allows your 12 buttons on the side of the Naga to become 24. You can use another modifier key and it gets out of hand. There's a lot that you can do with it. Plus the configurator with Synapse works fairly well. It's decent enough to mention. But that's not the only Razer mouse that we have available to us as far as gamers that I think is worth it, that I've used. And the other one is the Death Adder. And the Death Adder for most people is the mouse to go to. It's not an MMO mouse, so it doesn't have all the crazy buttons, which I rate as a high downside for MMOs especially. I mean, this is a guide for MMO players, so keep that in mind. But the Death Adder is just a very sleek mouse. It works great, and it will rarely ever let you down. The best thing with Razer too, it's worth mentioning, is if anything really happens to the gear, if it breaks, if it fails, something on it fails, they have a pretty nice return policy where they'll just usually ship you a new one, which is always nice. It's nice to know that if you have something that's going to cost you a lot of money, that if it breaks, they're not just going to say, well, it sucks to be you. However, those aren't the only two mice that we have to go through. We also have the Logitech G500S, which is one of the mice that I've used over the years. It's pretty good, actually. I like it a lot. I like the way it feels. However, Logitech also has another mouse, and it's an MMO mouse specifically, which is the G600. The G600 has those buttons like the Naga, and it works fairly well. So this is an option, aside from the Naga, if you've used a Naga and you don't really like it. I like both of the Logitech mice here, and Logitech typically make good stuff for their G series. And then we have the SteelSeries editions of mice. We have the SteelSeries Rival, which is a pretty good mouse. I've used it in the past. I'm not a huge fan of the SteelSeries stuff. I don't think that it works too great. So this isn't high on my list, but it is an option for you in case you're looking. So just the SteelSeries Rival, and then there's also the SteelSeries World of Warcraft mouse, which is pretty big, but I've used it and it works fairly well as an MMO mouse. I would totally take the Naga over it any day, but it's not a bad one. And then we have an honorable mention here, which is the Mad Catz MMO 7 Cyborg mouse. This thing really is an honorable mention because it looks cool, and it has a lot of different customizing things that you could do with it. It's a cool mouse, but it's definitely not high on my list there. But if you're on a budget and you can find one of these for cheaper than possibly a Naga, then that's an option for you. However, in all cases, like I said, with MMO gamers, I would suggest the Naga hands down. Best mouse I've ever used. I use one now, and I will continue to use one until I don't play MMOs anymore, which I don't see happening in any foreseeable future. So let's move on to talking about keyboards. So there are two different types of keyboards out right now. There's a standard keyboard and a mechanical keyboard. What you really need to know about the mechanical keyboards, which is what I would highly suggest playing with. Most gamers nowadays use mechanical keyboards because they're a lot better. Basically, a mechanical keyboard has a key that pushes down onto a button which is attached to a circuit board, and that then sends a direct signal to your computer, unlike normal keyboards, which don't really have that kind of infrastructure. So the key itself on mechanical keyboards are spring-loaded, so they move way quicker. You'll push down, and then they'll pop right back up. You'll notice when typing on a mechanical keyboard that you can type quicker, although if you get one, for the first time, you will make more mistakes at first. It's just kind of how it happens. It's one of those things that you have to get used to, but you will play a lot quicker on a mechanical keyboard, and it feels better. It's more tactile. The only problem with it is it's much louder. I have a mechanical keyboard in front of me, and as you can hear, the keys, they click pretty loud. That's a pretty good volume there, and that's coming from a microphone that is sound dampened, obviously. So it's even louder like in my room. So if you're in a house where people don't like a lot of noise, then the mechanical keyboards probably aren't for you. Or if you're in a recording situation, however, I don't care. I like the keyboard that much. That's how much I would rather use a mechanical keyboard and just have the clicking come through for you guys. The other thing with mechanical keyboards, though, is you can get silent editions of them. Like Razer calls them the Stealth Edition, but other companies don't use crazy terms for it. It's basically the different types of switches they use. So usually the brown or cherry red switches are typically much quieter than, say, the blue. And you don't need to know all the technical stuff there, but if you're looking at a mechanical keyboard, try to see what kind of switching it has, and you'll determine whether it's loud or not based on if it has a brown or red or any other color kind of switch. So the first keyboard that we're going to talk about on a list of quite a few, is the keyboard that I use, and that is the Razer Black Widow. This keyboard is the best keyboard I've ever used. I will never switch out to another one. If this one fails me in some way or another, I will get another Black Widow. That's how much I like it. I like it as much as my Naga. Now, don't think that I'm biased towards Razer here. These are just two really good products that I quite enjoy. So the Black Widow itself is a mechanical keyboard, as you heard, and there are different types of it. There's the Ultimate Edition, which comes with backlighting. You don't really need that, but it's kind of cool. Then you have the Stealth Edition, which is the quieter one. You have the Ultimate Stealth Edition, so you have backlighting and it's quieter. Then you have the Tournament Edition, which pretty much gets rid of the numpad, and that allows you to have more desk space. And lastly, you have combinations of all of those. So I use just the standard one, no backlighting, no Stealth Edition, and I love it. But the keyboard itself, what really makes it special to me, aside from the mechanical part of it, is it has 5 macro keys on the left-hand side, and you can bind macros. Like, you can create a macro in Synapse, which is the program they use, such as, invite macros for raids, and I totally use those when I'm inviting people to raids in Star Wars, and I hit the button, and within a few seconds it types out all of the names of the people that I need to invite, and I'm good to go. And it's quite nice. But you can also bind these obviously to abilities, and that's on the far left side of the keyboard itself. As far as other Razer keyboards go, you have the Deathstalker, which is a pretty cool keyboard, don't get me wrong. It's not mechanical, but it does have a cool UI on the right-hand side, which makes it quite a bit more expensive. But you can get, like, say, DPS meters for Star Wars on it, and you can surf the web on it. It's a cool keyboard. They have a Star Wars edition, but it's not the one I would suggest. Moving on to Logitech keyboards that I've used, though, I would suggest the G710 Plus, which is a mechanical keyboard. It is quite nice. It has those macro keys on the left-hand side like the Black Widow, and it looks pretty cool, too. It's a pretty slick keyboard. Aside from that, you have the G510S. That is another really nice keyboard. It's got a lot of extra buttons to use, and it has a little heads-up display that shows you a huge amount of information if you want it to. Then lastly, for Logitech, you have the G19S, which is, again, another keyboard with a ton of extra buttons to use. It's actually a pretty nice keyboard. I've used this one for some time in the past, and it's cool. I've had people who I know that raid with it. They like it a lot, so it's not too big of a deal. But overall, the mechanical keyboard, I think, of the 3 Logitech ones are the better ones. And then SteelSeries has 2 keyboards that I would suggest, which are the 6G version 2, specifically with the cherry red switches. That one is a really nice keyboard. I like the look of it. It's got that flat black look, which is surprisingly important in gaming gear because you're going to be at your keyboard a lot, so you don't want, like, finger smudges on it, right? You don't want like a reflective surface, so that flat like black nature to the keyboard itself is a plus in my opinion. Then you have their Apex, which again has a lot of extra buttons to use if you need them. It gives you options for putting abilities bound to several different buttons in the games. However, aside from the Black Widow, there's only one other type of keyboard that I would suggest, which are WASD keyboards. That is the company name, so WASDkeyboards.com, and you can pretty much get any single one of their mechanical keyboards, and they are fantastic. These are the only things that rival the Black Widow, in my opinion. They are really nice. You can customize them, and for the most part, they're pretty affordable for a mechanical keyboard too, so keep that in mind. Plus, a lot of pro gamers use these because they like him more than the Black Widow, say. But for the most part, like I said, I would suggest any one of their mechanical keyboards. Just go through the list and find the one that would really work best for you. So let's move on to talk about mouse pads, right? Mouse pads are one of those things that will change the way your mouse feels completely. You could have a really good mouse and you could have a terrible mouse pad, and then suddenly your really good mouse isn't really good anymore. So I would suggest getting a nice mouse pad. And the best part about nice mouse pads is they're usually fairly cheap. So here's the deal. I only have one mouse pad to suggest to you guys. I've used a lot in my past, but there's only one that I think takes the cake over all of the others, and you just can't beat as far as the actual surface of it goes. Now, here's the thing. I'm not pimping out Razer gear here, but I use the Razer Goliath, and this is the one that I would suggest. This is a really nice mouse pad. It comes in 2 different types. You have the Speed Edition, the Control Edition, which changes the way the surface is, so it'll change the way that you actually use your mouse and how you're able to control your mouse. And it comes in a huge amount of different sizes. You can have your standard size, or you can keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Mine is a fairly large version, and it covers pretty much my entire keyboard tray because I use a keyboard tray, and it actually pops out the back end of it. But if I had it up on my desktop, it would cover a lot, and I would have a lot of area to work with my mouse, which is a pretty big deal for a lot of pro gamers, a lot of competitive gamers, and stuff like that. Now, I'll be posting a picture at the end of this video on what my entire setup looks like, and you'll get an idea of how big the mouse pad actually is. But on most online stores, when you're ordering the Goliathus, you can change what size you're getting. So do a little bit of research on what size you want before you purchase it. But like I said, for the most part, mouse pads are fairly cheap, and I would highly suggest getting this as one of the first things when you upgrade. With that said, let's move on to headsets. And I know, like I said, I had been pimping out a little bit of Razer stuff. I love my Razer Naga, I love my Black Widow, and I love my Goliathus. That being said, it is about to get really sad for them when the headsets come. As far as Razer headsets go, there are only two that I think are even decent, and this is pretty sad considering they have some other really nice stuff. So the Kraken is a really comfortable headset, although the sound on it is okay, and I'm very particular about sound. I'm a musician, I play the drums, I have really nice in-ear monitors, so I'm used to what good stuff sounds like. I'm a huge audiophile, you call it that way. I've spent a lot of money on in-ear monitors for playing live music, and I am very particular about how things sound. When it comes to the Kraken, it sounds like total poop, in my opinion. The microphones on Razer headsets are always terrible. They have never been good, and for the most part, the Kraken and the Tiamat 7.1 are the only two that I would suggest. The reason why I would suggest the Tiamat 7.1 is because it is awesome, really. I mean, it has so many drivers in the ears. You pretty much have to have a sound card in order to use it. But the sucker is a nice headset. It sounds pretty decent, the Tiamat, and the microphone once again sucks on it. So if you plan on doing any voice communication with your guildies, it's gonna be bad. With that said, let's move on to the Logitech headsets, which are the G230 and the G430. I use the 230. This is the one I bought. Now, it sounds actually really good, and it's a little surprising to me. The Logitech headsets have always had really nice microphones, which is why I chose this one when I switched out my other one. The last one I was using was the Logitech G330. It's an older model. You can't really get it anymore, but if you can, that was one of my favorite headsets I've ever owned. The 230, which is the one I use now, I got specifically because I wanted the microphone to sound like my old one, so that way my videos wouldn't change too much when I switched headsets, because I had to. My other one was breaking. I sat on it. And the 430, which is the other Logitech headset, is basically the exact same thing, except it has surround sound, simulated surround sound, but it sounds really good. These are really comfortable headsets. They're kind of large, and the only problem I've had with it is they have a little bit of weight to them, which isn't bad because, I mean, they're well built. But the only problem with it is that if you're wearing it for a long period of time, it does tend to push down on your head, so keep that in mind. But as far as the best sounding headsets go, and the ones that I will typically suggest are the Sennheiser ones. And Sennheiser is a professional company that makes, microphones, really nice microphones, and some really nice speaker and headphone setups. So with this one, I would suggest the U320 and the PC363D, right? Those are really nice headsets. The 363 is one of the most comfortable headsets that I've had the pleasure of putting on my head. It's kind of like a cloud sitting amongst your head, just hugging you gently, and it is brilliant. And both of those headsets sound great. You're going to be paying for them, but both of the Sennheiser headsets sound really good. So I would suggest those over all of the other, even though I use the Logitech G230. But unfortunately, I don't feel like there are really any other good headphones out there for gamers. There's some really interesting Asus ones that have been released, but I think they're interesting, but I haven't used them, so I can't give you guys any suggestions there. And I mean, when I'm not using my Logitech headset, I put my in-ear monitors in, which are professional musician in-ear monitors, and these things can cost, usually base end for in-ear monitors are $300. So you're not needing to spend that much money on stuff like this. So just buy the headset that works for you. So let's talk about the other, peripherals that you can buy. And most of this stuff is kind of strange, and some of you will find more use for it than others, But the first thing is the mouse bungee from Razer. This thing is kind of cool. It holds your mouse cord at a specific spot, so when you are moving your mouse around, it's not bunching up or pulling away from your mouse, which sometimes is a problem for me. But the mouse bungee, when I've used it, has been really nice. Unfortunately, I don't have desk space to use it, and that's kind of my problem with it. But the next thing is the Orb-Weaver, which is what's typically deemed a gamepad. It has, keyboard keys on it, but it also has a thumbstick to move around. These are very strange indeed, but the Orb-Weaver is very cool. It has mechanical keys, and then the Logitech G13 is something that is very similar, except it's got kind of the Logitech flair to it. Both of these I know are quite good, and one of our raiders actually uses the Logitech one, and he likes it quite a bit. He would swear to it to never use anything different. But this is kind of personal preference thing. What would you rather use, a keyboard or a Logitech gamepad thing, or the Orb-Weaver? Alternatively, you could move it out for a mouse, so you could still do movement with the thumbstick. But I wouldn't suggest that. I don't think that is a viable option. But I mean, it really boils down to what you want. And then next, you have foot pedals. There are so many foot pedals out there that are just strange that you could go, looking for hours and get lost in a rabbit hole. I've seen stinky pedals used. Those are kind of cool. They are basically a foot pedal gives you more options, so you can play with your feet as well. They allow buttons to be pushed with your feet. I know a lot of people that use these for push-to-talks, for voice communication on like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or Mumble. It helps free up buttons, that you're otherwise using with your hands. So it gives you more flexibility there. And then the very last thing is the gunners, right? Gunners are these glasses that you can use, and if you have either a really bad monitor or poor lighting in your house and you're in front of a monitor all day, I would suggest the gunners. From what I've used of them, they do actually help eye strain quite a bit when you're looking at a monitor for a long period of time. And if you're a gamer that is in any competitive nature, whether it be, StarCraft or MMOs or anything like that, I would suggest picking up a pair. They're quite pricey, so do a lot of research on which ones to get, because a lot of them are slightly different. And I think there might even be a prescription version, but I'm not too sure of that. Don't hold me to it. But they're interesting, and they're pretty nice. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is this picture here that I've taken just for you guys. This is a picture of my keyboard, my mouse pad, and my headset. That is the Black Widow, the Naga, the Goliathus mouse pad, and the Logitech headset. This is my setup, just to prove that, this is my stuff. This is the stuff that I actually use. I love this stuff to death, and I'm not being paid by any of these companies that I've talked about today. So don't think that just because I have several Razer things that they paid me to say it. That's ridiculous, and I don't even think they would if I offered, to talk about their stuff to begin with. But this is genuinely the stuff that I like to use. This, I want to show you guys that the reason why I use this stuff is because, in my opinion, it's the best stuff out there, specifically for me. Now, my setup might be not ideal for you, so, take everything that I said with a grain of salt. However, look at all the other options that I gave you there. You can make your own setup based on what works best for you. But for MMO specifically, I swear, get an MMO gaming mouse. Those buttons on the side are the best. However, with all of that being said, let's wrap this guide up, because we've been talking for far too long about gaming gear, and it is one of those really strange things. However, it could potentially really up your game in Star Wars specifically, but other MMOs as well, so just keep that in mind. Now, as we move forward with the intermediate guides, we'll be talking more about hotkeys and stuff, so this is a good guide to start on with intermediates, considering I will be referencing most of the stuff that we talked about as far as gear goes. But on that note, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will try to get back to them as soon as possible. Alternatively, our awesome community members, I'm sure, will be giving suggestions to gaming gear as well in the comments section. And on that note, we'll see you guys next time.